Most people from the wider galaxy have never taken notice of this remote planet. Characterized by poverty, rampant crime, and a handful of misguided adventurers. For many, it marked the end of their journey. Yet, despite this, the fate of the galaxy has changed more than once here, beneath the twin suns, in the endless deserts of Tatooine. Millennia before most species even invented hyperspace travel, Tatooine was a verdant paradise, with dense jungle forests spotted with a few grassy plains and a network of raging rivers, small lakes, and large oceans. The dominating species on the planet were the native Kuumga, humanoid sentients who built an advanced civilization and had just taken the first steps towards colonizing other planets. These ventures into space, however, drew the attention of a great evil that ruled a large portion of the galaxy surrounding Tatooine. With little to no opposition, the infinite empire of the Rakata dominated thousands of star systems and soon turned its eyes toward these emerging spacefarers. When the infinite empire invaded Tatooine, the Kuumga stood no chance. Their colonies were destroyed, their home planet conquered, and the Rakata enslaved the Kuumga, forcing them into endless labor. Many years passed before a glimmer of hope emerged among the once proud explorers from Tatooine. A devastating plague ravaged the Rakata, heralding the impending downfall of the infinite empire. They rebelled against their oppressors, but it was too soon. The rebellion failed, and the infinite empire punished the Kuumga with all its might. An enormous fleet amassed around Tatooine and relentlessly bombarded the planet from space. They ceased only when the oceans had evaporated and the planet's surface began to melt. What was once a lush paradise turned into a barren expanse of glass. Just a few years later, the infinite empire of the Rakata collapsed due to the rampant plague and escalating infighting. However, Tatooine would never again be the hospitable planet it once was. Over the millennia, the green past of the planet was forgotten. When explorers rediscovered Tatooine, it was characterized by expansive deserts, like the Dune Sea. Strong winds shaped the sand into vast, shifting dunes, leaving unprepared travelers disoriented and unable to navigate the ever-changing landscape. Sandstorms would often hurl sand high into the air, and within minutes bury everything beneath a thick layer, erasing all traces of these lost souls, never to be found again. In the legendary Mushroom Mesa, the wind had carved out large rocky areas over long periods, leaving behind towering stone sculptures that loomed over those seeking refuge in their shadows from the radiant gaze of Tatooine's twin suns. Outside of the sandy deserts, Tatooine was dominated by arid rocky landscapes like the Jundland Wastes. Dry mountain ranges interrupted by deep valleys and gorges with sharp rocks and hidden caves stretched over seemingly endless areas. In this barren, rocky landscape, danger could lurk around every corner, just waiting for the unwary. It was here that the untrained eye was most likely to spot some rare signs of vegetation. In the shadows of the mountains, you could find patches of razor moss or small bushes that had taken up residence in nooks and crannies, living off the smallest drops of moisture that condensed when the first warm breezes touched the still cold rocks and the mist of the night fell in the early morning hours. Some plants, like the funnel flower, developed unique methods to extract moisture from the air. They drew in hot air and funneled it through the cooler lower parts of their stems, causing water to condense inside the plant itself. Only near the few watering holes could larger plant life thrive, mostly hidden underground, safe from the harsh sunlight. Oases with surface water were so rare that they became the stuff of legend. Most beings on Tatooine would go their entire lives without ever seeing one. As one of the largest animals on Tatooine, banthas roamed the planet in small herds. These herbivores could survive for weeks without food or water, and their thick fur protected them from the harsh sunlight. Many farmers on Tatooine relied on banthas as beasts of burden. Although domesticated banthas were common on many planets, Tatooine was home to one of the largest populations of wild banthas. Womp rats were among the most common creatures on Tatooine, with various species inhabiting nearly every environment. Smaller ones could be found on the outskirts of cities, scavenging in streets and littered backyards, feeding on waste or small animals. Farther from the cities, they grew larger. The biggest specimens, reaching up to 3 meters in length, roamed the rocky deserts, hunting in packs and even attacking fully grown banthas that had strayed from their herds. The planet's unchallenged apex predator was the legendary krayt dragon. These carnivorous reptiles were the giants of Tatooine's wilderness and of spiritual significance for Tatooine's native tribes. Krayt dragons came in 2 distinct species, one living in the sandy deserts, the other preferring the rocky mountain ranges. The adult animals were on average up to 50 meters long. However, as they never really stopped growing and could live to be over 100 years old, stories of krayt dragons twice that size were not so easily dismissed as exaggerations. In rare cases, sand particles in the stomachs of these animals over the years formed the legendary krayt dragon pearls, which were of enormous value. In the northern part of the Dune Sea, buried deep into the sand, lived the sarlacc, a mystical creature that shared features of both animal and plant, and of which only a few specimens were known to exist in the galaxy. In a large depression in the sand, called the Great Pit of Carcoon, only its enormous mouth was visible. It devoured creatures of all sizes that slipped or fell into the pit, ensnaring them with the many tentacles surrounding its maw. Its massive teeth ensured no escape, and the unfortunate prey was slowly digested over hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. After millennia of being forgotten by the larger galaxy, the first settlers arrived on Tatooine around 4,200 years before the Battle of Yavin, establishing the village of Anchorhead as their base of operations. The settlement was strategically built near one of the rare underground water reservoirs, a precious resource on the arid planet. As the first explorers ventured into the desert to cartograph adjacent regions, they soon encountered the two native sentient species of Tatooine. First were the Jawas, chatty bipedals that lived in badly constructed collections of houses and tents, organized in large clan structures. To protect themselves from the elements, the small-bodied Jawas wore thick leather cloaks at all times. From the darkness under their deep hoods, only their large yellow or orange glowing eyes were visible. The Jawas were friendly and open-minded towards the settlers from the very beginning. However, their lack of understanding of the ownership of unattended objects led to increasing problems and earned them a reputation as petty thieves. Soon, trade relations between settlers and Jawas were established. Encounters between the settlers and the Sand People, another indigenous group of Tatooine, were far less amicable. These primitive humanoids wrapped themselves in bandages to protect their skin from the sun and to conserve moisture. The Sand People, who lived in nomadic tribes, viewed the settlers, much like the Jawas, as intruders in their territory and responded with hostility. However, their scattered nomadic lifestyle meant they mostly resided in remote areas of the deserts and mountains. After the settlers learned which regions to avoid, encounters with the Sand People became relatively rare. The settlers who came to Tatooine were mostly adventurous miners, who tried to make a fortune after geological surveys showed some promising resource deposits on the planet. A short time later, after word of these survey results had spread, the first major business invested on Tatooine. However, it soon became apparent that the minerals from Tatooine were of poor quality and could not be processed to metals that could be used in industrial production of any kind. Huge mining projects were abandoned. Zerka Corporation, one of the major economic players at the time who was active on Tatooine for close to 400 years, was the last to leave the planet after none of their endeavors turned out to be successful. Most of the industrial equipment remained scattered across Tatooine's deserts, where it was either slowly broken down by the elements or salvaged by Jawas. The many sand crawlers, huge mining vehicles with onboard processing plants, were taken over by the Jawas, who began to adopt a partially nomadic way of life. They traveled back and forth between settlements and their own villages to trade, while being better protected from the elements and the Sand People. Situated too far from Republic space, the retreat of the industrials left the settler society on Tatooine largely without leadership and law enforcement. Those who stayed behind on the planet were confronted with poverty and harsh living conditions. While some settlers tried to make a living with moisture farming or local trade businesses, crime started to flourish. Smaller criminal groups quickly staked out their territories but were in constant conflict with each other. This situation attracted the interest of major crime syndicates, and eventually, the Hutt cartel established a presence on Tatooine, uniting the smaller criminal groups under their control. As one of the largest independent forces of the time, the Hutts, despite Tatooine's distance from Hutt space, used the planet as a hub for smuggling and other illicit activities. The Hutt cartel were the de facto rulers of the planet until the Republic and Sith Empire established bases on Tatooine to grow their influence into this part of the galaxy. After the war, the planet was again abandoned by all parties, and the few poor souls left behind were forgotten by the rest of the galaxy for centuries. An official rediscovery by the Republic 1100 years before the Battle of Yavin brought more attention to the desert world. All kinds of travelers now more frequently strayed to the remote planet. Although soon after, at the beginning of its so-called Dark Age, the Republic gave up its activities on Tatooine once again. Again, a largely lawless planet, the Hutts and other criminal syndicates returned to Tatooine to exploit the local population and run their illegal businesses. For centuries, different crime groups fought for dominance on the planet. Independent from the Hutt cartel, a young Jabba the Hutt, who had just seen first success with his own criminal organization, moved to Tatooine. He soon became a big player in the underworld and later rejoined the Hutt cartel. A few hundred years after the Republic had abandoned the planet for the second time, a group of Bomar monks arrived on Tatooine. They were looking for a place where they could practice their religion undisturbed. Tatooine, where there were only a handful of settlements at the time, seemed to be the right place. On the northern edge of the Dune Sea, the group built a small, improvised encampment. After a while, however, this seemed to be insufficient. Wildlife and natives continuously disrupted the studies of the monks, who believed that true enlightenment could only be found if one's spirit would be disconnected as much as possible from the real world. To no longer have to worry about the outside world, they soon built a large monastery with thick walls made out of stone and durasteel. Years later, a man named Alcara briefly made the Bomar Monastery his home. Having studied the Sand people extensively, including learning their language and forming a close bond with one of their tribes, Alcara initially appeared sympathetic. However, he later turned to a life of crime and led a group of Sand people in an attack on a police camp near Bestine that hindered his illegal operations. After the attack, Alcara and his gang betrayed and massacred the very Sand people who had assisted him. News of this brutal betrayal quickly spread to other tribes. From that point on, the Sand people became much more aggressive towards settlers. They began launching attacks on remote moisture farms and small villages, often without provocation, resulting in numerous kidnappings and deaths over the years. Eventually, Jabba the Hutt drove Alcara out of the monastery, and his own organization took over. The monks, in exchange for protection and assurance of peace and quiet for their studies in the monastery's deep chambers, tolerated the use of their sanctuary by Jabba's forces. Around 100 years before the Battle of Yavin, a new mining rush set in motion a major settlement movement on Tatooine. Many new settlements were founded, while older cities such as Mos Eisley grew rapidly. The crash of a colony ship from the planet Bestine 4 led to the founding of Isley, later renamed Mos Eisley, around the crash site, as well as the founding of the city Bestine, which would become the capital of Tatooine decades later. While the Jawas were mostly happy about the new trade opportunities and technologies the settlers brought to Tatooine, conflicts with the Sand people increased. In the year 93, before the Battle of Yavin, a settlement called Fort Tuscan, in a previously uninhabited area, had to be abandoned only 2 years after its foundation due to continuous fierce attacks by several clans of Sand People. Many attempts to recapture the fort failed because the Sand People would quickly resume their attacks. These relentless assaults earned them the nickname Tuscan Raiders. With the growing population, new businesses and industries were established on Tatooine. Some shady and criminal, some others less so. Bars, cantinas, and casinos were open to satisfy the settlers' desire for entertainment on the otherwise harsh planet. Both businessmen and criminals saw great opportunities to make a fortune. Pod racing introduced a thrilling new sport to Tatooine. The desert flats and narrow canyons provided the perfect setting for exciting circuits that drew numerous spectators. To celebrate Bunta Eve, an annual Hutt holiday commemorating Bunta the Hutt's victory in a major conflict nearly 25,000 years ago, the Hutts established one of the galaxy's most prestigious races. Held in the northern Dune Sea, just outside Mos Espa, the race featured a grand arena built around the start and finish line. The event attracted hundreds of thousands of fans and racing enthusiasts each year, and betting fees on the races became a major source of revenue for the Hutts. Although the popularity of pod racing would decrease over the following 20 years, the event was renewed by Gardola the Elder, the biggest rival of Jabba the Hutt. The additional income from fees on the betting business also benefited her organization. After the Sith were believed to be long extinct, 2 Jedi were unexpectedly attacked by a dark side Force user during a stop on Tatooine. Despite the ambush, they managed to escape and report the encounter to the Jedi Order. It was later revealed that their attacker was a Sith Lord, marking the first open confrontation between a Sith and a Jedi in centuries. Shortly before this incident, the Jedi had discovered a child with an unusually strong connection to the Force, who was believed to be linked to an ancient prophecy foretelling the restoration of balance to the Force. That same year, the significant feud within the Hutt cartel's presence on Tatooine came to an end. The wealth and power of Gardola the Elder finally succumbed to her gambling addiction. In a short time, she lost most of her influence on Tatooine's underworld, and was from then on forced to work for Jabba. Without a strong law enforcement on the planet, and being the single most powerful crime lord after the assimilation of Gardola's organization into his own, Jabba the Hutt became the unofficial ruler of Tatooine. Amid rising galactic tensions, Jabba sought to remain neutral and avoid drawing unwanted attention to Tatooine, in order to prevent any interference with his criminal operations. When the Clone Wars broke out between the Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems, also known as the Separatists, the Republic returned to Tatooine to grow its influence on this part of the galaxy. Republic forces built a small spaceport near the city of Mos Osnui. Jabba played along as good as possible to not provoke a larger number of troops to be stationed on his planet. But shortly after the construction work was completed, a strike force of the Confederacy raided the place and destroyed the spaceport. This drew a lot of unwanted attention to the remote desert world. Jabba was furious when he learned that one of his competitors, a Hutt named Borka, had betrayed the Republic and had sold valuable information to their enemies. More Republic troops arrived on Tatooine and were able to defeat the Separatist forces. To get rid of this competitor, Jabba told the Republic general of Borka's betrayal. The Republic forces attacked Borka's base of operation and the traitorous Hutt was killed. 1 year later, Jabba reached out to the Republic with a call for help. In a cowardly act of betrayal, his son Rotto was kidnapped by the Separatists in collaboration with Zero the Hutt. The Republic agreed to rescue Rotto in exchange for clear passage of Republic forces through secret hyperlanes that were used by the Hutts for smuggling. After the successful rescue mission, Jabba became an ally of the Republic. This relationship persisted even as the Republic was transformed into the Galactic Empire. However, over time, the Empire grew increasingly critical of the Hutt's criminal activities and influence. Despite this, Tatooine remained of little strategic importance to the Empire, which only maintained small bases in Mos Eisley and near Bastille. Around the time of the Battle of Yavin, the Imperial garrison in Mos Eisley conducted a brutal search operation for 2 droids carrying valuable information that had escaped from a starship attacked by a Star Destroyer in the orbit around Tatooine shortly before. During this operation, the Empire slaughtered a group of Sand People, killed the entire crew of a Jawa sandcrawler, and clashed with a rebel cell near Anchorhead, defeating them as well. After these efforts proved fruitless, the Empire blockaded Tatooine, leading to further skirmishes with locals. This blockade marked the beginning of a significant increase in the Empire's presence on the planet. In the years that followed, the Empire launched attacks on several cities on Tatooine to suppress any rebel activity on the planet. Despite the Empire's increasing attention, the Rebel Alliance repeatedly succeeded in destroying important Imperial facilities in covert missions. Three years after the Battle of Yavin, Jabba the Hutt was killed during an execution event at the Great Pit of Carkoon. The prisoners that Jabba intended to feed to the Sarlacc by throwing them into the pit, as he had done with so many before, managed to free themselves. In the confusion, one of Jabba's female slaves strangled him on his sailing barge with the very chain she was bound with, ending his reign over Tatooine for good. The death of Jabba created a power vacuum in Tatooine's underworld. Crime gangs, once united under Jabba's control, plunged into a bloody conflict, wreaking havoc across nearly every community. In some areas, entire streets were destroyed and cities were thrown into chaos. Lady Valerian, a crime lord from Mos Eisley and Jabba's primary rival in recent years, seized the opportunity and took over a significant portion of his operations. Following the Empire's defeat at the Battle of Endor, Tatooine officially joined the New Republic. After negotiating a deal with the New Republic, Lady Valerian even secured a position in the planet's official government. Over the years, however, the Hutts managed to reassert their dominance on Tatooine, though infighting led to frequent changes in leadership. The New Republic's influence on the planet gradually waned until it was completely lost during the chaotic first years of the Yuuzhan War. Jabba's nephew eventually took control of the remnants of Jabba's empire and restored it to its former glory. Once again, under the influence of the Hutts, the Hutt cartel chose Tatooine as its new base of operations and refuge after losing their homeworld, Nal Hutta, to the enemy. Tatooine served as a haven for many Hutts until they were able to reclaim Nal Hutta toward the end of the war. Although Tatooine remained a crucial hub for the Hutt cartel and its criminal activities, life for its inhabitants remained harsh and unforgiving beneath the relentless blaze of the twin suns.